Hello everyone, my name is Devansh Gupta and today I will be presenting my research thesis. I was mentored by Dr. Shashank and Dr. Philip and I am glad to have the opportunity to present my research thesis to you today. So my topic is EEG Microstate Instability and IDO pathway activation in Major Depressive Disorder, a characterization and hypothesis study integrating electrophysiological and uranium originating biochemical markers. So before I begin, I want to clarify how this research should be evaluated. This is not a clinical diagnostic claim. This is not a treatment proposal, and this is not a casual biochemical experiment. This is a systems level integrative neuroscience study and is interdisciplinary in nature. It combines neuroscience, immunology, and then I will also explain pharmacological tie-ins with established drugs in the US like immunofolate, which play around with the immune system as well, and how relevant they are to my research topic. The purpose of this work is to examine whether independent biological systems, namely large-scale brain network dynamics and immune metabolic regulation, converge onto the same instability signature in major depressive disorder. Everything in this presentation is built around coherence, consistency, and convergence, and they're not isolated findings. Let me walk you through the table of contents of today's. First, I will introduce my research topic and I'll give you the background behind my research topic. Second, I will state my problem. I'll display my problem statement. Third, I'll discuss methodology. Fourth, I will discuss results and relevant discussion around those results. And fifth, I will conclude my research presentation. So I will move deliberately and explain each graph, table, and metric clearly as well as we move through on different parts of my research presentation. Okay, the introduction. So, major depressive disorder affects hundreds of millions of people worldwide and is one of the leading causes of disability in teenagers and in elder people as well. Yet, despite decades of research, three persistent challenges remain. First is the biological heterogeneity. Patients with the same diagnosis often treatment unpredictable. Many individuals do not respond consistently to standard treatments. And third, lack of early objective biomarkers. By the time depression is actually diagnosed, neurosystems may already be chronically dysregulated. These challenges suggest that depression is not best understood as a neurotransmitter deficiency, a lesion in a specific brain region, or a single molecular abnormality. Instead, modern neuroscience increasingly views depression as a disorder of regulation across large-scale systems. Now, what is depression and what is EEG? Traditional neuroscience asks, where in the brain is depression located? Systems neuroscience asks, how does the brain behave over time? This distinction is actually pretty critical. A brain can have normal anatomy, intact regions, average activity levels, and still function pathologically if temporal coordination between networks is unstable. Now, what is EEG? Electroencephalographic microstates represent quasi-stable scalp topographies lasting approximately 60 to 120 ms, reflecting synchronized neuronal activity across large-scale networks. Now, patterns in electroencephalographic microstates are divided into four classes from A to D. This is one of the longest-standing microstate literature in history, which dominate healthy resting EEG with balanced durations, coverage, and transition probabilities, and also they do occur in MDDs as well, which is major depressive disorder, as global instability and elevated ghost transitions, which are below 30 ms that fail to stabilize. Now, the background behind the project. So from my early days in boarding school, I was always interested in neuroscience. I've done a lot of projects in school itself, in school science labs, about what neuroscience actually pertains or contains, but I've never actually done a project or research to this scale. And I was always excited to do something or discover something in this field. And I think I've potentially been able to do so. So diving into EEG data sets, I spotted elevated ghost transitions. What are ghost transitions? They are microstates in MDD patients below 30 ms and brain fragmentation sign with potential breakthrough. Linking this instability to IDO uranium neurotoxicity could force the next pink electrophysiological biochemical marker as well. Now, depression increasingly appears to be such a condition where a disorder of temporal instability is there and not structural loss. The insight motivated me to focus on EEG microstates, which directly capture moment-to-moment network organization. Okay, And the third part that EEG microstates actually depict are repeated motifs of neural coordination. Decades of research shows that in healthy individuals, four canonical microstates dominate resting EEG. These states have balanced durations and coverage, and transitions between them are structured and non random. In other words, the healthy brain exists temporal order. Now, ultra short microstate segments, typically under 30 milliseconds, are central to the study that I'm presenting to you. These segments are too brief to support stable information integration, coherent perception, or effective network communication. They represent failed stabilization events where the brain begins to enter a functional state but collapses before coordination is achieved. I refer to these as ghost transitions. In healthy brains, these are very rare. In unstable systems like MDD patients, they increase dramatically. Thus, ultra short segments serve as a direct quantitative marker of neural instability. Now, what is my problem statement? While analyzing EEG datasets early in this project, I noticed that MDD EEG signals were not simply altered, they were fragmented. Microstates appeared and disappeared rapidly, as if the brain could not sustain functional configurations. This observation led to a deeper biological question, which was what global biological process could destabilize large of the the research study, and second was that covered the biochemical part of the study. Both data sets are credible in nature. They have medical licenses to their names, and they're published in reputable journals in the world like EUBI studies, and they belong to reputable data set collections from the world like Figshare. So a little about these data sets as well. So I used literature established IDEO literature to compare my findings from what I observed from electroencephalographic data. So again, let me give you some overview on dataset 1. So before I do that, actually, I want to reinstate my central hypothesis, which was the central hypothesis of this study is immune-driven metabolic instability leads to large-scale neural instability, observable as EEG microstate fragmentation in major depressive disorder. Now, dataset 1. So dataset 1 consists of 182 EEG recordings. There are 91 healthy controls and 91 MDD patients. Recordings include eyes open and eyes closed recordings both. From each EEG file, I extracted multiple categories of metrics. One was microstate duration, second was coverage, third was occurrence, fourth was transition probabilities, fifth was ultra short segments or ghost transitions, and fifth was alpha band power. Each metric captures a different dimension of stability as a whole. Before dataset 2, let me go to the methodology. So EEG signals were average reference to reduced electrode bias, then they were filtered between 1 to 40 hertz, downsampled to 100 to preserve temporal fidelity. Global field power peaks were extracted because they represented moments of maximal synchronization. K-means clustering with K equals to 4 was chosen to align with canonical microstate literature, avoid overfitting, and preserve interpretability. Each time point was labeled, allowing precise temporal statistics. Alpha power was included as physiological validation and not as a primary hypothesis driver as well, right? Now, you can see this is the same of what I spoke. And then we also plotted bar graphs and transition heat maps to compare our recordings. So these are some code snippets of what we ran in Google Collaboratory to analyze these EDF files of both healthy and healthy controls and MDD patients. Over here, we're defining, in the first code snippet, we're defining our metrics. We're importing a lot of tools. In the second code snippet, we are adding alpha metrics. We are adding microstate metrics. We're computing alpha power. And in the third code snippet, we are plotting transition graphs, and as well as we are quantifying the duration, coverage, occurrence, transitions of different microstates in both healthy controls and MDD patients. So these were my results. This is the result table. So state A, that was the state A microstate, showed reduced duration and reduced coverage in MDD patients. This means the state appears less often and collapses farther. State A is also associated with salience and sensory engagement, aligning with anhedonia, which is also seen in IDEO-related depression pathways. Let's move to state B. State B shows moderate reductions, indicates secondary instability, but not primary instability as state A. State C shows increased duration and coverage, which suggests persistent attentional engagement consistent with rumination. And stage D, minor increases in the stage D likely reflect compensatory control requirement. So over here, we have healthy patients' duration and coverage per microstate, MDD patients' duration and coverage per microstate, the delta between the healthy and the MDD, and the effect size, which was the Welch test that was done to quantify whether the instability is large, medium, or small. As we can see, state A has largest instability, 0.52. State B, 0.41, which is still large, but not as large as state A. State C, 0.38, and state D is 0.29. And alpha power itself is also large, 0.55. And in MDDs, we can see the alpha power is drastically reduced to 0.72 plus minus 0.19. Okay, one note to also add over here: all what do you call all statistics were in fact recorded to 1e minus 12. That means they are very significant. There's very less room for error in these numbers, so they're all credible in their own way. Now, healthy controls show 1874 ultra short segments. MDD patients show 4521 ultra short segments. We can see it over here. Now, this is a 2.4-fold increase with a large effect size. So this is the strongest indicator of temporal fragmentation. Now, alpha power reflects cortical inhibition, thalamocortical stability. Its reduction supports impaired inhibitory control and increased neural noise. This aligns mechanistically with neuroimmune effects as well, right? If you look at how serotonin is moved away to neurotoxic acids and neuronin, we can observe that these are the same effects that we see in IDU-related depression pathways. Now, integrating all findings, these are some of the graphs that Google Collaboratory gave us as a result of plotting. We can see over here microstate duration MDD versus healthy, microstate coverage MDD versus healthy, and this is the effect sizes MDD versus healthy. This gives us a comparison between healthy controls and MDD controls to identify which microstate in of itself is very unstable in MDD patients. Over here we can see microstate A reducing drastically as compared to microstate B, C, D. Microstate C is still higher in MDD patients, D as well. B is reduced, but not as much as A. So the most vulnerable microstate in MDD patients can therefore be concluded as microstate A, which was done after a lot of deliberation and tests like the Welch test or Cohen's D. Now, here's some data interpretation. Integrating all findings, immune metabolic instability shows excitatory inhibitory imbalance, network destabilization, and microstate fragmentation. EEG microstates become a bridge between molecular dysregulation and lived cognitive experience. Over here again, we can see that there's a 2.4x higher microstate fragmentation, which is ghost transitions in microstate in MDD patients as compared to the healthy control. Alpha power is also reduced by 11%, which is consistent with chronic hyperarousal. Now, microstate alterations, it's important to note that state A was duration was minus 13.7 seconds, coverage minus 0.05. So it has the largest effect. State B also has moderate reductions, D equals to 0.41. State C has reductions, but not as much as state B and A. That's D is equal to 0.38. And state D, there's small increases, D is equal to 0.29. Now, what is the interpretation of all this data? MDD exhibits noisy, unstable brain dynamics, reduced persistence of salience-related states with compensatory attentional engagement. Increased fragmentation reflects impaired temporal coordination of large-scale networks, and there's clinical relevances, right? State A is the most vulnerable, so there's largest dual reduction in duration and coverage when we jump from healthy controls to MDD patients. Now, dataset 2 overview. This is something very important because now we're going to compare our findings from our analysis from dataset 1 to dataset 2. So dataset 2 examines serum profiles of the tryptophan neurorenin pathway in individuals at higher risk for MDD. The key findings is instability and not absolute elevation. There's one, fluctuating metabolite ratios like IL-6, IL-10, IFN-Y, IFN gamma, IL-12, MCP1. Dynamic immune signaling and sub-threshold but persistent dysregulation. This mirrors, in fact, EEG microstate instability that we actually talked about. What is the key takeaway? Depression risks reflects immune metabolic instability and is not a single biochemical marker. Now, changes are dynamic and sub-threshold rather than large categorical differences. Increased inflammatory cytokines like IFN gamma, IL-12, MCP1 is associated with altered neurorenin metabolite ratios. Neurotoxic metabolites, 3-HK, show instability across time points, suggesting early network vulnerability, not last stage damage. The pathway primarily affects network level neural regulation rather than focal brain region. Right now, what is the mechanistic relationship? IDO activation reduces serotonergic tone and alters glutamatergic balance, increasing neural noise. Then, neurorenin metabolites disrupt thalamocortical regulation and alpha-mediated inhibition. Third, these effects destabilize large-scale brain networks responsible for salience, attention, and control, which is again microstate A. Fourth, 2.4x or threshold increase in ultrastate microstate segments or ghost transition reflects network fragmentation consistent with immune-driven excitatory inhibitory imbalance. Fifth, reduced alpha power indicates impaired cortical inhibition and chronic hyperarousal. Sixth, collapse of state A aligns with diminished reward sensitivity and anhedonia. Seventh, expansion of state C is consistent with hypervigilance and ruminative bias. Eighth, transition instability mirrors the fluctuating metabolic and cytokine profiles reported in HR-MDD subjects. Ninth, EEG microstate instability represents a system-level neural signature of inflammatory and metabolic dysregulation. 10th, findings are consistent with IDO-mediated models in which depression emerges from network instability rather than structural loss. And 11th, EEG microstates provide a non-invasive window into the downstream neural consequences of neurorenin pathway imbalance. Now, what are the limitations of this paper? There are some limitations that are important to know. This study does not establish causality. IDO was not directly measured in the brain as the same patients. Rather, the credible IDO established literature was taken as reference to our analysis and then compared. EEG also has spatial limitations. Medication effects are possible confounds. However, the internal coherence of findings still remains so strong, right? Now, conclusion. This research suggests that depression is fundamentally a disorder of temporal coordination. EEG microstate fragmentation provides a scalable, non-invasive marker of neural instability. Immune metabolic dysregulation offers a plausible upstream mechanism as well. Thank you so much for listening.